Welcome back to another episode on the J.A.T side. I'm your host, Jalen Austin Taylor, and today is February 5th, 2025. Yes, we are in 2025. It's the first episode on the J.A.T side in 2025. And, as you can see, I'm doing something a little bit different this year. For the past 2 years on the J.A.T side, I have done a Black History Month series where I've discussed one Black history figure every single day. Last year it was 29 days, in 2024, the year before that it was 28. And just, about 2 to 3 minutes discussing one or two different Black history figures each day in the month of February. But this year I was called to do something a little bit different. And with all the uncertainty and all the change that's happening in the world, I think this series is going to help not only, the people in this community, but it has the potential to help everybody in this country if it's able to be heard by people around the country. But I don't want to talk too much before I introduce my special guest, second time guest on the J.A.T side. Now, for those of you who are new to the podcast, you probably don't know who Dr. Anthony Outler is, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce him real quick. He's a over 20-year educator. He's currently a district level employee, and he's an adjunct professor at Morehouse. And more importantly, he's a great father, a great mentor, and just a great leader in this community. And I'm so honored to be able to have him on the J.A.T side tonight and to just discuss really some important, very, very serious topics. But this is a man who has a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge, and this is going to be a great conversation, especially to kick off not only the J.A.T side in 2025, but a new series. So I'm just going to let Dr. Outler say a few things, and then we'll get into the topic.
All right, man. Look, wonderful introduction, and I'm glad to be here again. Second time here on the JT side, and I'm just glad to see the longevity of your program, brother. You've been at it for what we're looking at now, maybe over 2 years. How long have you?
Over 2 years, yeah. First episode was February 28, 2022, so almost 3 whole years at it, yeah.
Nice, nice. And just been wanting to acknowledge you and really commend you for using your platform in this way. There's all kind of podcasts and different people, engaging, this medium to relay information, and just quite frankly, a lot of it's nonsense. And so for you to really be engaging in these types of conversations, brother, and using this platform in this way is commendable. So definitely glad to be here and share with you and your audience today.
Yes, sir. So for those of you who don't know, this series is going to be titled A Long Road. And the slogan that I came up with to go with this is seeking unity without complete uniformity. And that's a very complex statement when you really think about it, because unity is something that I don't think we have in this world. And uniformity, on the other hand, is what some people think of as unity, because it means that everybody's the same. But unity does not mean uniformity. And that's actually something that Dr. King said. He said that unity has never meant uniformity. A lot of people think to be unified, you have to act the same, you have to do the same, you have to be the same, you have to believe everything that everybody else believes. That's not the case. We can be unified and have different beliefs, different traditions, different upbringings, but we can still walk together in this world, because we ultimately know we have a specific amount of time. We're not going to be here forever, and this life is very precious. And if we don't live unified, then we're going to be in chaos, which I think there's a lot of chaos going on in this world right now. And honestly, Dr. Adler, I don't know about you, but I feel like this message and this series is at the perfect time, because it's starting to become so much different change. Now it's starting to affect us in the United States, where it's like we got a new president making new changes, new laws, new different things are happening, and
Hmm.
it's a lot of different stuff going on. And if we're
Yeah,
not
yeah.
unified, then it's going to get bad.
Absolutely. You quoted Dr. King a little earlier. One of Dr. King's a book that he wrote toward the end of his life was called "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" Right? And so what you're saying is spot on in terms of the extent to which we continue to live in a world, where we have this us and them mentality, right? A world that's plagued with racism, sexism, classism, all the different ways that, we separate people. As long as we continue to live like that, our world cannot prosper, right? I'm reminded of actually another quote. There's a quote that comes from the Baha'i writings, and it says, the well-being of the world is peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. And so what you just said, just made me think about that. We can't continue to have a world where we have extremes of wealth and poverty. Some people living in tent cities, under bridges, and others are experiencing exorbitant amounts of wealth. Can't continue to live in a world where women are paid less than men for doing the same jobs. I'm sorry, my dogs are barking in the background. We can't continue to live in a world with religious strife, right? People fighting over what religion is best when there's only one God, you see. Yeah. And so I think right now in this moment, we're witnessing the consequences that come along with clinging to these old patterns of thought, right? As long as we cling to this us and them and people are vying for power and position, it's going to only lead to our destruction. And so we're going to need to unite or perish, basically.
Yeah, that's, I mean, spot on, spot on. And this series, like I said, I think that it has the potential to be heard all around the country and possibly even around the world. But also, some of that also goes into my listeners. Like, I'm gonna need you guys' help to get this message out. I'm gonna be sharing some great information and bringing on some great people during this series, but it can only go as far as you guys take it. So that's why I need you guys' help to get this message out there, so that the more people that can hear this, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make them change, but at least if they hear it, it'll make them think about it. And when we start thinking about things, that's when they start to change. If we're not thinking about them, we can't change. So
Absolutely.
we have some key subtopics to discuss, and the actual title of this first episode is going to be "What does unity look like in 2025?" And I have three subtopics that me and Dr. Outler here are going to discuss today. And the first one is, how can we exemplify unity starting in our own communities? So I'll let Dr. Outler start on this.
Yeah, I think, that's where it all begins, right? We can't talk about, a lot of times we talk about the world needs to unite, right? We need to unite nations and countries and that kind of thing. But the same people who are saying that, find a difficult time even uniting and connecting with their neighbors in their neighborhood, right? And so I think it starts at the grassroots. It doesn't start with any type of government policy or anything like that. It starts with, hey, speaking to people in our neighborhood, forming relationships, assisting one another, or being kind to one another. All those types of things, I think, are the foundations for unity. And it starts right in our own community, looking out for one another, making our brothers and sisters' problems our problems. So if something happens to with my neighbors or something hurts my community, I'm going to take that, as my personal responsibility. That's also my problem. So I think, seeing one another as brothers and sisters. Dr. King, he said this as well. He said, what impacts one person directly impacts all of us indirectly, right? And so when we think of ourselves as a unified community and we function in that way, then I think those are the foundations for, community unity is the foundation for unity in our cities, right? In our state. So it starts right here in our own neighborhood. So I think that's a great place to begin.
Yeah, and going off of what Dr. Outler said, it really starts in your own neighborhood, as Dr. Outler was just mentioning about loving the neighbor, building relationships, starting in the community that you live in. You know, we always, I feel like we always, as humans, we strive to always accomplish the biggest things, and that's for various reasons. Different people have different motivations. I can't speak for you, but I know that sometimes, I know personally, I'm motivated by, oh, I want to be seen, I want to be, I want to be recognized. But then I realize I have to tone that back, because this life that I'm living as a believer, it's like, this is not about me. I'm just a small piece in God's magical big plan. But I have to do my part, and I can't do my part if I'm self-centered, if I'm self-motivated, if I want all the credit, And if I don't ever take the time to think, man, how can I help out the person that lives next to me? Or how can I live out the person that lives across the street from me? How am I going to be able to serve God's ultimate purpose in my life? And
Absolutely.
it's just like, I think that's a problem that we all have dealt with at some point, is
Hmm.
letting our
Hmm.
personal ego or pride or whatever get in the way of actually thinking about how we can help somebody else. Because
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
one
Jalen,
thing,
stepping out of our comfort zones, right? I live in a neighborhood now, where, there's all types of various cultures and, people's, ethnic groups that, here. And it seems as if, the patterns that exist in our wider community exist right here in our neighborhood where people hang out in pockets, right? You have our South Asian brothers and sisters, and you have some Latino, and we have people of African descent. And one of the things that I've kind of charged myself with in our family is really seeing how we can begin to facilitate some relationship building of cross culturally, right, where people are coming together. One of the things that we're looking at doing here soon is a potluck dinner, actually, perhaps here at our house. And Jalen, we had talked about one time, doing like a community unity festival, that kind of thing. But bringing people together and giving them an opportunity. And I don't think is it people that, necessarily don't want to connect with others. I think, we become so comfortable in our own spaces that, we don't cross those lines. And so I think, again, this is the work starts at the very micro level, right? Like you said, Jalen, sometimes we think about, we talk about changing the world and we look at the problems in the world. We look at it from this huge space of where I got to, go give speeches. I got to go lead marches. I got to do these, kind of large scale types of movements and mobilizations of people. But in essence, I think we forget the power of our own everyday decisions, our own daily actions, right? Our own exertions to build unity and to build community. I think that's where it begins. Can't look outside, right? We got to look within, and then we got to make sure that we are doing our part, whatever we can do to facilitate unity everywhere we go.
and I want to also say, I know you mentioned about the Community Unity Festival, something that me and you talked about, and I really believe, I don't know if you feel the same way, Dr. Aller, but with what happened with COVID, right? It really separated everybody. And I remember, I'm gonna just use a specific example. I don't know if you remember, about 5 years ago, 2018, 2019, somewhere around there. I don't know if you remember, but every single Friday after school, there would be a mass gathering of all the kids pretty much in the neighborhood, and we would just play outside for 2, 3, 4 hours, and it would just be so nice because it would be like all the kids. Some parents would even come out. It would just be a great time. The end of the week, everybody's having fun, everybody's playing, you know. And I felt in that time more than any other time that I've ever lived in this community. We've both been living here for years and years now. And I don't know about you, but I can speak for me. During that time, I felt more connected to everybody than I ever had before. And when COVID hit, it was like it never got back to what it was before. And I feel like people just kind of, like you said, got into their own little, little cliques and stuff like that. And it was just so, it was like, man, I wish we could just go back and relive those times, because that was really when you felt the strongest sense of community in my eyes. And, it may seem as small as, oh, yeah, we're just playing basketball, or we're just playing football, or we're just playing kickball. But when you're doing that stuff, you're bonding, you're spending time with the
Hmm.
people in your
Hmm.
community. And whether you realize it or not, those bonds are going to get stronger and stronger and stronger.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And people underestimate that, right? That's where it begins. Again, I said it before, right? It begins with those connecting hearts, connecting, eating with one another, playing games with one another. Most of the time, we talk about, things like racism and such, and, people having these prejudices against other people. Most of the time, it's because of what they have heard, right? Or narratives that have been transmitted through the media and different things like that, but they have never, been in relationship with these people. They've never sat down, to talk and establish these bonds of friendship. And what you're talking about, right? I agree, right? We were playing kickball and all that. You had all these various cultures and people just really connecting in that way. And so when we see this, right? And so you recognize that we haven't gotten back to that. So then I think when we recognize those types of things, then it's necessary for us to take personal responsibility in terms of how do we begin to build these bonds, right? How do we begin to, create opportunities for, this to kind of reignite that. So, and I think that's where we really get to, that's, where we all must get to a point to where we feel it is our duty to be community builders. And so, and that's what I'm hearing you, right? Just being able to recognize that. Because some people don't even recognize that. They're just like, well, hey, this is just what we do. But for you to have, to be able to read your reality in that way, to read what's happening and to know that, something's not right about this, something is different, is very powerful. And I think the next step with that, when we recognize those things, is think about, what we can do collectively to change it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be very careful when I say this because I don't want to like, I'm not. Let me just say, I'm not God. I don't know what the future holds, but I can speak for today. And COVID is still out there. Don't get me wrong, but it's not as prevalent as it was when everything was shut down and we were in the height of the pandemic. Now, like I said, I cannot speak for tomorrow. Can't speak for next month, but right now I do know that COVID is settled down a little bit. It is still out there, but it's settled down, and it's time to kind of get back to the community. It's time to start fellowshipping again with the community, and it doesn't have to be some fancy thing. It doesn't have to be. It could be as simple as playing a game. It could be as simple as having a conversation. And it was just like, man, it's so like you said, it's so powerful. Like when you think about the connections and the possibilities, but it's just like, man, you really just want to go back. But at the same time, it's like we can't focus on the past. We gotta focus on, the present and how do we get back to that, ultimately restore that. And it kind of leads a little bit into the next point. I'm kind of building on like our community, but I'll start on this one, the second subtopic we have today. How can we make outsiders, quote unquote, feel like insiders when they visit our communities? So for me, if you don't know what an outsider is, it's basically anybody who does not live in your community. It could be somebody who lives in, let's say, Gainesville, and they come to, Snellville or Gwinnett County, which is where me and Dr. Outler live. And how do we make those people feel like insiders? And I think this is it's an interesting question that you can take from a lot of different ways, because you can say, oh, well, I'm going to make an outsider feel like an insider by talking to them or inviting them to an event or doing something like that. Or you could say, I'm going to make an outsider feel like an insider by, personally making the commitment to developing a relationship with that person or with their family, or trying to figure out what they like to do, or trying to come into their traditions and kind of see how their life is, or kind of see what they came from, or what they're doing. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here, but I just think it's about making the effort in my eyes, because it's like, you know somebody could be visiting the city for a day. They could be visiting your community for a week. They could be, you never know how long it is, but it's kind of just like thinking about, hey, have I seen this person before? I see him walking in the neighborhood, but I've never seen him. Hey, let me go talk to them. Or hey,
Absolutely.
let me introduce myself. It starts with something
Absolutely.
small, and then it can, ultimately work itself up bigger. But Doctor, all I want to see what you have to say about this.
Yeah. I think, one of the things that goes back to is this whole idea of insider outsider, right? Um, when we're, I think the first step is to just get rid of that idea altogether, right? About when we encounter someone, because when we recognize the humanity of all people, there really are no outsiders, right? When I look at you, brother, I see myself, right? And so I have to have that same type of thought when I engage with anybody, right? No matter what their religion, race, gender, right, class, right? I have to see all these folks, all people as my brothers and sisters. And then it goes to, once I can do that, then there's another quote that says, let your heart burn with loving kindness for all who may cross your path. right? Matter of fact, I think that's one of the quotes we memorized in the junior youth program. But nonetheless, right, when I see you as myself, and I recognize your humanity, right, I'm not dealing with the color of your skin. I'm not dealing with how much your clothes cost. I'm not dealing with, any of those differences or ways that you show up. But I look at you and I see your humanity. Then there are no outsiders and insiders, right? Those artificial boundaries. Yeah, we live in Snellville. Someone else lives in North Gwinnett, South Gwinnett. But ultimately, we're all inhabitants of one world, right? And so when we begin to really internalize that principle of the oneness of humanity, when we really see each other as one soul in many bodies, then we will be on our way to building a world that functions that way, right? So if I'm seeing you as I see myself and the decisions that I'm making are within that same paradigm, then we'll begin to build systems and institutions and governments that function in that way as well, right? And I think that's where it all begins. Do I see you as myself?
Yeah, that's a very good point that you made, Dr. Outler. And, obviously, like I said at the beginning, you got a lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge and expertise, and you deal with a lot of people. You know, I know, obviously, I know you personally, but I know you deal with a lot of different also people as well. It's not just like you deal with one particular type of people. Working in the school system, like I know you deal with like, different people from different backgrounds. And then when you teach at Morehouse, you're dealing with another level of, you know, people because they're like older. And then I just think that, that's a great point. Seeing other people as yourself and just making the connection with somebody else and treating them like you said. Just treating that person like yourself and try to basically love them as yourself. In the scriptures, love your neighbor as you love yourself. And you can translate that. It doesn't just mean love my neighbor as I love myself. It can also mean something completely different. Love the person in your community as yourself. Love the person that you go to school with as yourself. I feel like when you start to live in that mindset, it's like you're going to automatically see the result. You're going to see stronger relationships. You're going to see stronger connections. And it's gonna be amazing. So yeah, great point, Dr. Outler. See other people as you see yourself and get rid of that insider outsider type of mentality. I think Dr. Outler has temporarily left. Okay, there he is. Dr. Outler, are you good?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I had a couple of some technical difficulties there, but yeah, I was just listening to what you're saying, brother. It seems such like such a simple concept, right? And some people may even feel like, yeah, it sounds cliche or idealistic to love your neighbor as yourself. This idea of us being able to just the idea of like our own individual actions in our communities and connecting with other people is the foundations for beginning to shift the way that our world functions. But that's the way, right? It's not going to come because ultimately those who are currently in power really have no they power structure depends on disunity, right? The way our society is structured, it depends on certain groups excelling and other groups being marginalized. That's just what it depends on. That's the way it functions. And so John Henry Clark, who's a great historian, he once said, the powerful will never educate the powerless to take their power from them. Dr. King says, power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice. And so what this means to me is that the way that the power structures currently exist, right, we have to shift that from trying to one group outdo the other and really look at how do we exert the power of love, like you said, the love of our neighbors, right, loving of our brothers and sisters. How do we exert that power, right, to create a society where all people are able to thrive, right, where there's no what Dr. Bob Marley actually says, no one is free when others are oppressed, right? So You know, how do we engage the power of love to create that world? And that comes from the work you're doing right here, brother. Um, with your podcast, right? This conversation alone, right? Some of the things that have been shared here that you shared, some of the things that I've attempted to share here. This is the work. This is the work. And the more people that can get involved or engaged in this community building type work, about these meaningful conversations, exploring topics like these, is how we begin to see that change in our world. So I appreciate what you're doing, my brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I really, I'm, yeah, I really think that it's just, man, it's like every day, what can I do to make somebody else feel better or feel just like more involved or more connected? Because it's like, man, it's nothing like feeling like you're unified with somebody or unified with a community. That's why I know the Bible talks about so much about the husband and the wife and how they are supposed to be one. And it's like when you think about when you're in that mindset of I'm gonna put myself before me, I'm putting others before myself, like I said, you automatically get into that mindset. But we do have one more subtopic to discuss today, and that's how important is diversity when it comes to unity. And I'm gonna let Dr.
I think diversity is essential, my brother. There's a quote from the Baha'i writings that says, ye are all the flowers of one garden. So imagine a garden and all the flowers are the same color. The beauty of the garden comes in the variety of the colors and such, right? I also think about like the human body. Our body has all types of systems and parts and things that are very diverse, right? Our respiratory system doesn't work like our cardiovascular system, right? All these systems work hand in hand to keep our body alive in diversified ways, right? I think of a band, for example, right? You got all types of different instruments, right? You go to Brookwood, you got the wind instruments, you got the drum, right? And all these various instruments, and they're all diverse, right? You don't see the drums trying to sound like a saxophone, or you don't take the saxophone player and start beating the saxophone against, right? So all of these unique sounds, right? They harmonize and they produce a melodic sound, right? And so I think, when we begin to view our world in that way, it's not about us assimilating to become like someone else. Our world has a way of normalizing certain people, certain ways of being, certain modes of engagement. They have a way of centering certain ways of knowing and looking at the world and forcing people to kind of assimilate into that space. And I think that's a problem. And it also, discredits other cultures, right? We live in a society that centers Eurocentric Western ways of thinking, and and it strives to take away that diversity. And sadly, we live in a world now where, with books being banned and all types of things happening, the conversations around, different groups of people are being silenced, where there's this desire for people not to even learn about different cultures and the ways that the diversity that exists in our world. So unity and diversity is essential.
Yeah, unity and diversity. And like I said, I'm gonna go off of what Dr. Outler said. I mean, they go hand in hand. Unity at the heart of it ultimately requires people to accept one another for who they are. And this is my belief. But unity requires people to accept
I was hoping I wasn't muted when I was talking just a few minutes ago.
no, you weren't muted.
Okay.
You but like I said, I just wanted to say, like, in my eyes, unity is when we can look at another man that's different from us, whether it's a different skin color, a different religious belief, a different political belief. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this. But you can have different political beliefs and still be in unity with somebody else. And a lot of people think, oh, oh, I'm just using an example. Oh, he's a Trump supporter. Oh, so I'm not gonna be friends with him. We can't. How are we gonna move forward if we can't coexist without believing the exact same thing? Remember, Dr. King, unity has never meant uniformity. But as much as people, you know, want to try to separate themselves just because they have a different political belief than somebody else, I mean, it's like it's foolish. And there's another Dr. King quote that says, "We must learn to live together. We must learn to live together as brothers, or perish together as fools, or we will all perish together as fools." And it's like, if we're gonna let a political belief or a religious belief stand in the way of us being unified and us being able to work together as humanity. It's not about working together as black people. It's not about working together as white people. It's not about working together as Asian people or any other race of people. It's like, it's about working together as humanity. And once everybody starts to think like that, we won't see war. We won't see what's happening in Israel and in Palestine, or we won't see what was happening with Russia and Ukraine. We won't see it because everybody is thinking of, how can I make the what's around me better, not just how can I get myself to where I want to be. And we had to be able to look at people who are different from us and say, you know what, I'm gonna respect. I may not agree, but I'm gonna have enough respect for this person who has a different belief than me or who is different than me, to give them enough, respect to be able to say, you know what, they're a human just like me. They go through challenges just like me. They have times of sadness just like me. They have doubt just like me. None of us are perfect. None of us have been perfect. So we all have our flaws. We all have imperfections. And it's about accepting people's imperfections and flaws as if they were our own. Because when we start to accept other people's stuff as if, like Dr. Alice said, see the person that you're looking at as yourself, that's when everything starts to change. But as long as we keep, as a community or as a country, we keep the mentality of, you know what, we never swore on the J.A.T side, never will. But when we start to say F them because they have a different belief, or, you know what, they're stupid, they're X, Y, and Z, and you start to just say all these things, and we stay in that mindset, we're not going to be able to move forward, because we cannot keep on staying in the same cycle if we want to really be able to change what's happening around us. Some people say, "Oh, I want the world to change. I want the world to be a better place," but then they're the same people who are cussing somebody out because they have a different religious belief than them or a different political belief. We can't move forward if we're like that. But you know, this has been, in my opinion, a great start to a long road with the series. But before we close out, I want to give Dr. Outler the floor one final time to give any closing remarks.
Brother, I think, again, this is an awesome conversation. And, I think you ended it well by, just really reflecting on our current moment, because we are in a moment of some extreme polarization, political polarization, where you have, this disunity, strong disunity that's happening. And I think what it's going to take is for us to, first of all, understand that the system in which we are currently functioning within is lamentably defective, right? It's messed up, brother. It's difficult to have unity when you have a political system, a bipartisan political parties, separate parties, right? You have, it's difficult to achieve unity when the very structures of our society don't facilitate, these cross-party political conversations. And I think it's only when this work that you're doing here, right, this conversation you're having here, that people begin to have with one another, right, Democrats and Republicans together, sitting at the table, really exploring, what does it mean to be human, right? What does it mean? What does justice look like, right? What does it mean to, regard one another as brothers and sisters, right? Just really exploring what that looks like, right? Is it possible to build a world where everyone had their basic needs are met, right? Where the basic human rights of all people are respected, where women are respected, right? Where no matter what class level someone is, they are respected as human beings, right? So having those types of conversations, I think, exploring those topics with folks, really raising the conversation away from politics to these lofty ideals of what, really spiritual principles, right? I think that is when we will begin to forge the necessary bonds of unity, because we have a shift in people's thinking, right? Their hearts. And really, I guess what I'm ultimately saying is, what does the oneness of humanity and humankind look like? And getting people to discuss that, right? And I think what you're doing here, again, like I said, is a great step in that direction.
Yes, thank you for that, Dr. Outler. And one more time, just thank you for for joining me today and being able to share your insight and just your thoughts. Really, what's going on. And like I said, I could not thank you enough. And you know, obviously, all of you guys know when I bring somebody on the J.A.T side, I'm not paying them any money. I'm not. This man took his time out on this Monday night to, when he could have been doing 1,000 other things, but he took the time to come on here, have this important conversation, and this man, he's a man of many different talents and skills, and for me to be able to have him in my life, and not just have him in my life, but have him on the podcast for the second time. I'm just so blessed and honored. And I just want to close out this episode with saying that it's okay to be different. And I'm gonna just explain that it's okay to be friends with somebody who doesn't support the same political candidate as you. It's okay to be friends with somebody who has a different religious belief than you. It's okay to be friends with somebody who's a different race than you. A lot of times we think, well, I need to have, example, if I'm a white man, oh, I need to be around all white people. I need to have a white friend group. I need to have a white church group. I need to have a white. No, it doesn't have to be like that. We can be as diverse as we want to. And diversity is so beautiful, because when you bring those people in from different walks of life, when you bring the people in from different areas and they've been through different things than you, not only are you able to see the other side of things, but you're also to learn empathy. You learn empathy for people when you hear what they've been through, when you learn about their upbringing, and when you start to feel for another man as if they were yourself. That's when we start to build that unity that we want to ultimately have, and just be able to live as a community, as one big community. And I think ultimately that's what God designed humanity to be like. He didn't design us to be divided and to be, separate from one another. He wanted us to engage with each other. That He wanted us to be able to live in unity and harmony with one another. And now we went so far away from that. Like I said, I'll say it again. I'm not God. I can't speak for God, but I feel like that's what God wanted when He created humans. And it's gotten really disgusting to see how far we are away from God's actual will of what this world was created to be. And people can hear this, they can bypass and say, man, this kid, he doesn't know what he's talking about, or this is stupid, this is irrelevant. Or you can say, you know what, I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna try to make the changes, even if they're small. And one day we won't be able to live on this earth anymore. And also one day, pick up the book, living book, read the book of Revelation, see what's really going to happen if we continue to go on this path. You think God wants to release His wrath upon this earth? He doesn't want to, but it's written. It's written in the scriptures. It will happen.
And I think, my brother, we're witnessing some of that right now with what's going on around us. And, and it's unfortunate that it takes these types of catastrophic moments in history. We see kind of the world unraveling around us for us to, kind of understand the very point that you're raising here tonight. There's something that I came across the other day, and I'll read this. It says, chaos and confusion are daily increasing in the world. They will attain such intensity as to render the frame of mankind unable to bear them. Then will men be awakened. So we've had all these opportunities to come together and to unify and to live as one human family, to establish just systems and institutions. We've had all these centuries to get that done. But again, we continue to cling to these childish ways of thinking, us versus them, prejudice, discrimination, all the things that keep us bound. And the extent to which we do that, right? Dr. King often reminded us, he says, the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. Can't continue to do these things, right? Or the world, we'll see the world around us begin to crumble. But this, according to this quotation, it says, then will men be awakened. Then we'll realize they just stick together. You mentioned COVID earlier, right? At the same time, you're saying, we had to kind of isolate and that kind of thing. But also there were all these examples of people coming together to assist one another, right? Help one another. We had a food drive here in our own neighborhood, right? I had a neighbor who brought over some tissue because, the tissue was going out of the stores. And you had people setting up, the students were at home learning. So you had people setting up learning pods where the neighbors would set up a space and all the kids would come with their computers. And so you had all of this mutual aid happening. But it took that catastrophic event in order for people to understand we needed to live as, together and to treat each other as brothers and sisters. And so this moment that we're living in is going to be very interesting, Jalen, in terms of some of the things that are happening around us that are going to require us to awaken to the fact that we're all brothers and sisters and we all we got. It's unfortunate, but here we are. So I think, in the midst of the chaos, there's an extreme or tremendous opportunity for us to learn and to awaken to the fact that, we've got to unite.
And we serve such a gracious God. For anybody who's a believer, with everything that's happened, we shouldn't even be here right now, truth be told. But God, I don't know how, but He's been so good and so gracious to us. And I think a lot of people take that for granted. Believers, non-believers, or lukewarm, anything like that. If we take for granted the grace of God, like you said, we're going to be awakened and we're going to realize, oh my goodness, this is because of what we've done. It's not because God just wants to be an angry God or He just wants to, be, no, that's not what it is at all. It's because of our own action. And we have a choice, ultimately we can say, you know what, we're going to change, we're going to be better. Or we can say, I'm going to continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. You know what that is? Insanity. So don't do the same thing and continue to expect the same or continue to expect a different result. Change your behavior and change the world ultimately. If we all change our behavior in the positive direction, then we ultimately will be able to change the world. But yeah, that's all I have today. Once again, big thank you to Dr. Outler for joining me on the J.A.T side today. I really appreciate it. Man, this series is going to be awesome. But all I'm asking is you guys share here and just really change. Share here and change. Share these messages. Hear them. Hear them in your heart. Not just with your ears, but hear them in your heart and look inside of yourself to see what you can change to help the community around you first. Really starting in your neighborhood to be better. So grateful, so thankful. Dr. Outler, thank you so much. But yeah, we've been on here for almost an hour now, so our time today has come to an end. But this is so powerful, and if you will take your mind, open up your heart, and listen to this, I think it'll help a lot of people. So thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. If you made it this far in the episode, just, I thank you for listening and for sacrificing your time to listen to this episode. I love you guys, and I'll be back next Wednesday for episode number 2 on a long road seeking unity without complete uniformity. All right. Until next time.
Thank you, brother. Great conversation.